Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm going to be continuing my conversation with actress Julie Cobb. Please welcome back, Julie. You mentioned the political scene and the House on American Activities, and I understand that he was called in. He spoke, and that he chose, for personal reasons, to name some names. How was that? What was the impact that you were aware of from all of that for the family, for him, for
Well,
industry?
I'll tell you how it happened. I went to school at San Francisco State, 1965, the midst of the free speech movement. Vietnam War came, just very political atmosphere. And I was not prepared. I was marching against the war, and I was marching. And there were people in what was called then the New Left, who were very hostile toward me. And I didn't know why. And it had to do with my dad. So I came home Thanksgiving and asked my mother, and she said, well, ask your dad. So we had lunch, and I waited until the end of our lunch. He walked me to my car, and sure enough, I said, tell me. And we sat in my car for probably an hour and a half. And his story, weeping, by the way, this is very personal, but I don't mind sharing it. He said he ran from the committee for several years. He had the ability to put it off. He was at the height of his career. He and my mother definitely did attend left-wing meetings. Everyone in their circle in Hollywood did in those years. And what he said was the committee chased them. He said, you have no idea what it is when the United States government decides we want you. People are living through that today. Ultimately, he agreed to meet in a hotel room, not in the committee, very hush-hush. And he says he was presented with a list of names that had already been given, and that he did corroborate several of those names that he knew. And it was probably led to his first heart attack. The divorce followed. He was shunned. People crossed the street to avoid talking to him. People in their former circle claimed he ruined their careers. It was a time, just a horrific time, as somebody called only victims. There were only victims. Nobody came out of that time all right. And he didn't. So he wept. I wept. That's the story I believe is true. Other people, of course, he is historically a friendly witness. And that's what happened.
I recently had a conversation like this with Ellen Geer, with Will Geer's daughter.
Sure.
And of course, Will was on the other side of it, where he refused to name names and then didn't, she talked about all those years when he couldn't work and they didn't work and traveling around. And but she said that there was points where Ellen would hear something and say, well, how could you have done that with what happened with your father? And she said that Will never blamed anyone who spoke, he said, each person has their own circumstances and why someone made the choice they made, whether it was to hang on to their career or whatever it was about. They had a family to support. Everybody had to make their own personal choice. And he never blamed anyone who made a different choice than he made. And
well, that's
so,
extraordinary.
yeah.
Especially, I don't know if Will knew who named him. There were people who felt certain that my dad named them, um, and had, terrible bitterness toward him, which I also understand. Will is right. You have to understand everyone,
Mhm.
um, however difficult that is. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Worked with people later, Jeff Corey. Did you know Jeff?
I didn't know Jeff, but I know of him as an acting teacher, of course.
Yeah, we worked on a couple of things together, and he was named by someone, and it was horrible.
I mean, it was something that never should have happened in the first place. So we have to respect people's viewpoints and their choices. And that's a lot of what I feel the Waltons represented was not judging other people when you do not know all the circumstances.
Yeah,
And
no,
to try to have compassion regardless of what people do. That there's some very evil people, but most people are just doing the best they can.
I agree. There are several motivated by the worst impulses people are capable of, and a lot of the other followers are just misinformed or frightened, or but anyway, yes, I agree. Yeah. And I do agree with you about the Waltons. It was one of the shows then and now, historically, that did represent wonderful values, human values, family, true family values, and it had a huge impact.
Yeah, just in terms of the examples of how to try and live one's life with integrity and do the best you can to do what you think is right. I mean, those are things that I think we can all aspire to.
I do my best.
Be there for other people and try to support our family, our community. And
I totally concur with you. I have 3 grandchildren, and that's why I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. My daughter was transferred here for work. Her husband followed her here for work. They're both attorneys. Although my daughter was a wonderful actress, I have to say, but she wanted steadier work. And I have a 6.5-year-old, a soon-to-be 5-year-old, 2 boys, and a 3.5-month-old baby girl.
And are they all there?
Yes.
How exciting.
And I see them every other day or every day. They're moments away. So I'm blessed. But what you were saying is true, because I still work a little. I'm not really pursuing work, but I am pursuing some work as a director in the theater. But as far as these kids, I thought, well, what is my purpose today? And it's all about them. I'm a model. I'm a role model. I'm a source of love. I'm a source of inspiration. I'm a source of high comedy and low comedy. I play with them. The exchange of love back and forth is basically what I do with my life today. So I feel very blessed, and I really take it to heart. This is what I can do, and obviously I try to be a good friend and a good partner, and I try to do exactly what you said. The influence in my world is where I have the greatest impact.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and how how great to have so much warmth and love, or that you
Unbelievable.
have been able to surround yourself with. And yeah,
Unbelievable.
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of work, there were some things that I found kind of fun, and some connections that I don't know if you knew any of the Walton cast prior to working on the show, if there was anybody you'd worked with before.
No, I don't think so.
But I did see that subsequently you did an episode of The Mississippi that was Ralph Waite's show.
Yes.
Had that chance to.
Well, my husband at the time, my ex-husband, Rosemary's father, produced that show.
Oh.
Yes. And so that was shot on location, and I had a lot of contact with Ralph. He was wonderful. I loved him, actually. I think everybody did. Yeah, he was he was swell.
Yeah. Another one of those actors that raised your game, I found, when you.
Yeah, oh gosh, yes. Yeah. He was
yeah.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah. I also noticed that we have a lot of actors who did the Waltons who then also did episodes of Little House on the Prairie. So there was that sort of back and forth connection. So I note that. I don't, relative to those two experiences, working on two similar sort of very family-friendly shows, were they comparable experiences?
They were comparable in kind of their mission purpose. They were also warm, welcoming, fun shows to work on. Similar. I think the Waltons, in my opinion, looking back, it felt more authentic throughout. That's my memory of it. A Little House on the Prairie was fun. I've had contact with Melissa. We were active in Screen Actors Guild politics, and she's lovely. Also, Victor French, who was very dear to me at one time, directed.
Also worked on the Waltons.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Back in those days, you could work on the same show in different roles.
Yeah.
That's not the case today. If you were a guest star on a show today, that was it. You either recurred in that role, that character. But in those days, I did several episodes of Gunsmoke, and it was different. But they were comparable. Michael Landon had a very kind of playful sense of humor. He was a lot of fun. And
we also have some Star Trek connections, because I don't know how many actors did both shows, but Ralph Sinansky, who directed a number of episodes of The Waltons, also had directed episodes of the original series of Star Trek. And so I noted that you were the only female red skirt to
red shirt
on planet.
The first female red shirt to die. Yeah. That was my first job.
Oh, wow.
It was the first season of Star Trek. I had done, I think, a TV commercial, but oh my goodness. That was my first job. And I had, Shatner had done a film with my dad, The Brothers Karamazov. He was wonderful with me. And I had taken an acting class with Dr. Spock, with
Leonard Nimoy.
He taught. He was a wonderful acting teacher. So they were very helpful and sweet with me. Those early years in TV, I don't remember this so much in the Waltons. The makeup was like pancake orange makeup. It was so different now from high def. I just looked in the mirror and thought, oh, I hate the way I look, and it's so awful. And I was nervous, and just to walk and talk and say lines, I was 20 years old. So, or 21. but, really nervous. So, but it was, who knew that Star Trek was going to be iconic? And that episode was iconic because of my death. I did, when my daughter was acting, she was in Voyager. She was in the spin-off of Star Trek Voyager. And we did two conventions, Star Trek conventions together. And I had no idea the number of people who live Star Trek. I mean, eat, breathe, and live for Star Trek. They knew things about me and my career and my character. It was overwhelming, huge, just huge.
Thank you so much for joining me for this segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons as I continued my conversation with Julie. If you're enjoying these segments, please do hit like and subscribe. I'll be back with more Behind the Scenes of the Waltons, more episodes, more Ask Judy, and probably even more special guests. Thanks for watching.